I'm glad that you joined me today as we cover week 6 of our series entitled Miracles, Nothing's Impossible with God. As we talk today about Esther chapter 2, we're going to cover the miracle of dual citizenship. Yeah, it's another interesting idea of a miracle, because the idea of dual citizenship means that a person doesn't just have citizenship in this world, but because of the redemptive power of Jesus Christ, we now are seated in the heavenly realms, that we have a citizenship in heaven. In fact, in Ephesians chapter 2, starting in verse 19, "So then, you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God." That's right, because of the power of Jesus Christ, we have now been brought from just citizens of the earth. Now we're citizens of heaven. We've not been taken out of the world, as Jesus said in his high priestly prayer in John 17, but we've been sent back into the world. So now how do we balance, or how do we make sense of and understand the miracle of God in a dual citizenship framework? Well, that's where we are today. As we talk about Esther chapter 2, we come to this place knowing that the king, King Xerxes or King Ahasuerus, has issued a decree to send out his eunuchs and his officials to go and bring in about 400 virgins for him to pick the next queen from. We learn in verse 5 that there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimi, the son of Kish, a Benjaminite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives. Notice in verse 6 the word carried away. Then listen to the rest of these verses. Been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives, carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. I think we get the idea here that Mordecai had been carried away. Other versions use the word exiled. Exile, exile, exile. The point is that there had been the exile of the people of God into Babylon. But King Cyrus had issued a decree that it was time for the Jews to return back to Jerusalem. In Jeremiah chapter 29, the Jews knew that they were going to be in exile for a long time. That's where we see where the Bible prophesies that they should marry and carry on their relationships, and they should also plant gardens and build houses and kind of get comfortable in the land, because they were going to be there for a while. But the point is that King Cyrus said it's time to go back home, but many of the Jews remained in Babylon, and now under the Persian Empire's power, they're now in a strange land. It's interesting. We might ask the question, why did they stay? Why didn't they go back to Jerusalem? And at first we might think, well, that's peculiar. But the issue, I think, is similar to why we might not choose to go back or to orientate with a different place. It's because sometimes we get comfortable. We get comfortable working and living and going about our business in the world that we live in, that we sometimes forget that we're dual citizens, that we're not just worldly people. We are God's people living in this world, but we are God's people. But in this passage in Esther chapter 2, we wrestle with the fact that this Jewish family are not really showing us any evidence other than their nationality as being Jew. We don't see anywhere in this passage where there's prayer. We don't see in this passage where there's any kind of festivals or any kind of cultural, Jewish cultural observations or holidays or any kind of special things that they were asked to do as the Jewish people being practiced. Rather, we see them kind of comfortable in their own neighborhood. And this is where we come to this place of dual citizenship. You see, it's been somewhere around 70 to 120 years, however you look at this experience. And it may be that it's not just Mordecai's choice. Maybe it's a generational choice. Maybe the people that came before him decided not to go back. And so generations later, they're still remaining where they are. And it's in that framework that we start to realize that there may be a family history of why certain things are still happening maybe in your family and maybe even in my family that aren't necessarily my choices, but they're choices that have been made that have brought me to this place. And we can see even in our nation's history, there are certain things that we are still struggling with today that are not necessarily because of choices today. They're because of generational choices that have been made. How powerful is it that God's people would see it as a miracle that we are not just citizens of this world, but we are citizens in God's household. And that we might say as God's people, it's time for heaven to start informing how we live on earth, rather than allowing earth to inform how we live as God's people. And that's the challenge. And that's where the miracle unfolds. Because as we'll see, this family, Esther, she didn't have a mom and dad. She's adopted as an orphan by Mordecai. And she's raised up in his family. And for some reason, God is drawing our attention to this passage in Esther chapter 2, saying, keep your eyes on this family. I'm not done with them yet. They were exiled. They were carried away. But even though they're carried away, they're not carried out of the presence and the view of God. And I want to give that to us as a challenge today. That even though we've encountered some weird things in Esther, things that just don't add up as far as, where are you, God? What are you doing? I'm saying Esther is a strange letter to us. It's so strange that I recently found out that Esther, in the VeggieTales series, of all the Bible stories that they took care of with vegetables and teaching those to children, Esther is the only story where Bob the tomato doesn't show up. I'm telling you, this is a weird book. But what we see is a challenge. And this challenge is, are we willing to be dual citizen people? And when I say that, I mean, are we willing to allow our citizenship in heaven to inform how we live on earth? And that's the challenge that I give to you, and that's the challenge for me. It's the challenge for God's church. How are we to live as God's people in a world that is foreign to his purposes? Whenever we get through and we talk about this, and we put our eyes on this family, and we think about all that God is ready to do through them, I want to challenge us with this thought as we keep close this idea of, even in a world that is a place where they shouldn't be, they should be in the place of God in Jerusalem, but they are not. They're in a foreign land, that God can still work in the darkness of the things that are taking place. If you read through the middle part of chapter 2, you find out that Esther is brought into 12 months of preparation with cosmetics and food and dietary and all kinds of ways to prepare her to be at her best. So along with 399 other people, other virgins, she goes and is paraded before the king and spends the night in his chamber, and ultimately is made queen of Persia. Now, this is a disturbing story because it reveals so often the darkness and the dark things that happen in our world. But it's in those dark things that we're able to see God clearly. We're able to see his purposes revealed. I remember years ago hearing Tony Evans preaching on sin and darkness and the power of God in the middle of those dark things. And he said, you know, when you go to inspect a diamond at a jewelry store, oftentimes they'll pull out a black piece of velvet or black piece of fabric and lay it over the glass of the jewelry cabinet. And then they take that diamond and they put it over that black backdrop for you to inspect it with the loupe. And it's against that dark backdrop that you're able to experience best the brilliance of the gemstone, the diamond. And maybe we could look at Esther chapter 2 that way. It gets to be pretty dark. There's some troubling things that we can't smooth over and make them seem better than they are. But when we look at it, we recognize that it's this dark backdrop that may be very well the best place and the best opportunity for us to see how God moves. Now again, God is not explicitly mentioned in the book, but his character and his nature is revealed. And today, as we talk about his character and nature, we're focusing on dual citizenship. That when God rescues us out of this world and puts us in his household, we are then taken back into the world, and heaven now informs how we live on earth. And that is a miracle. When we allow him to do that, we begin to see, even in difficult times, dark times, that the light of Christ can shine. This is what he says in Matthew chapter 5. You are the light of the world. Listen, if there's no darkness, you don't know what light is. There's a term, diffused lighting. Fluorescent lights that we see in a lot of office spaces are meant to take light at a low voltage and a low concentration, and it's put through a diffuser, and it shines the light out in all different directions. In fact, the idea is that the light bends around objects. The goal of diffused lighting is to reduce the likelihood of shadows. Now think about that. In our world, we don't do well with shadows. We want lighting to just light up everything. But listen, where there's light, there's also the presence and the opportunity for darkness. And we must keep it in our hearts that we are the light of the world, and we will shine the best where there is no other source of light. Well, whenever we think about this, I want to close with this idea that God is able to build his kingdom through our dual citizenship. Here's the perfect opportunity of a family who should have been in Jerusalem, but they find themselves in Persia. And God is still able to do for his people what only he can do, because where his people are, he is in their midst. God will not forget you where you are. There may be trouble and difficulty that you're facing. Maybe it's stuff that's brought on by choices you've made. Maybe it's choices of others around you. Maybe it's just because this world is fallen. Whatever it is, if you belong to God, he will not forget where you are. And the miracle of his presence is his promise to you. He will never leave you alone. Well, as we close up this time, there's two things I want to focus on. The first one is this: God builds his kingdom his way. We're looking at this kingdom of Persia. We're looking at King Ahasuerus, who's also known as King Xerxes, and he's looking to build his kingdom his way with concubines, with picking a wife out of 400 potential candidates. We see in this picture a fallen king and a kingdom that is fallen. But God will bring about his kingdom out of the fallen structures of this world. He's promised to do it. The next thing is this, that many times, although this isn't the only thing that's happening in the book of Esther, but I think it's true and we need to focus on it. God will oftentimes use the weakest person and the most unlikely person we could ever imagine to accomplish his most unlikely purpose in this world. And here we are again at that great promise that God can and will use you even though you don't feel like you're worthy or able or strong enough, or you're up against something you can't handle on your own. And it doesn't matter. God is able to do immeasurably more than anything we could ever hope for or imagine. And that's the truth of God's word. So as we look at this miracle of dual citizenship, would you begin to think about and maybe take inventory on a daily basis? How are you allowing heaven? What do I mean by that? How are you allowing the Word of God to inform how you live on this earth? How are you allowing heaven, God's presence, to be manifest or to be recognized in your life as you live and go about your daily work? How are you allowing God's Spirit to lead you into things that you might say, I can't do that or I can't affect that, but by His Spirit, I'll walk in that because He's promised that He would strengthen me. All of these things are wrapped into our dual citizenship, and it opens us up to be a part of bringing His light, bringing the light of Christ, and bringing His kingdom into a fallen world. Well, I hope and pray that you'll consider that your dual citizenship, only brought about because of the grace of God, would begin to inform in a different way in this crazy world we live in. Begin to inform how you live on this earth because you're a citizen of heaven.